Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I got a really interesting show for you today. I got a friend of mine, Brad Rombach, with me, and I think you're going to really enjoy his story because he's doing some things a little different than I talk about, which means I'm going to get to learn right beside you. So why don't we start by welcoming Brad to the interview? How you doing this morning, Brad?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So I love this channel because what's happening now is it's really allowing me to meet a lot more people. And we got in contact by a subscriber to my channel going, you know what, Michael, you need to meet Brad and see what he's doing. So I appreciate that. Anya, shout out to you because you'll probably listen to this. So thank you for making the introduction. So Brad, why don't we start talking with, what are you doing today in the real estate business? What does your portfolio look like? And then we'll start peeling that apart if you don't mind.
Sure. So over the last, pretty much the last year, I've been investing in a lot of turnkey properties, mainly in the southern Midwest. So, Memphis, Alabama, and now looking to Iowa on the next property I'm looking to close in with the next couple of weeks. I focus on that area I wanted to kind of pinpoint a general region to do most of my investments. And I focus on cash flow as opposed to appreciation, which is why I chose that area. I was somewhat skeptical because, you hear of markets in California, New York, and they hear of, you buying $100,000 house and they picture just shambles. So it's definitely a little bit different. And some people can't, it's almost difficult for them to conceptualize a house being a decent property at, $100,000 or $90,000 or 110. And that's where I've spent most of my time, is buying kind of like a B- or C+ area. Probably nothing that either one of the two of us would want to live in. But nonetheless, it's a blue collar neighborhood. It's been established for 30+ years for the most part. So there's some older properties, but that's kind of the market that I've identified for me that I would like to keep pursuing.
Yeah, there's so much in that I'm going to get I'm so fortunate to have you on this interview because I get to unpack it as well. First and foremost, you're in 3 markets in under a year. So kudos to you, right? That means you're taking action, right? You may not know this, but I talk to hundreds of people a month and most of them are stuck on 0, right? They're not taking action. So kudos to you for doing that. I am curious, which market was first? Was Memphis first? Did you kind of go in the order that you did?
I went to Birmingham first, actually. I went reverse order.
Okay.
So I did 2 in Birmingham, then Memphis, then Iowa.
All right. So why don't we talk about that first one? Were you living there? Was this all over the phone? Why don't you sort of set up what that first deal looked like, if you don't mind?
Sure. So I guess I'll give you the backdrop to that.
Yep.
So I worked with a client about a year ago. I move around a good bit. So I grew up in Ohio. I currently live in Florida, but every 6 months I move across the country. So when I was living in Colorado, I came across an individual who was successful in his own right. He had done some real estate and he had worked. It seemed like he had a hand kind of in everything. And we were closing the deal, and I said, I was like, "Hey, Jim," the client. I was like, "Jim, I'll knock off 5% more off your bill if you are willing to keep an open line to communication going forward." And I was like, let me reach out to you. Let me bounce some ideas off of you. And he's like, "Yeah, I'll take that." So that was probably it. It wasn't really much. I don't even think it was 5%. I think it ended up saving him $99. And that $99 that I forewent, I kind of let go of that. It totally paid dividends in the long run. And I think something that's difficult for a lot of people is everybody says, I want to get into real estate. I want to buy houses. I want to buy investment properties. And I think it's obviously a great idea, but people get very, 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 they almost get locked in what they're viewing. So they'll look at a property and they'll come close to pulling the trigger, but they never do it. And they'll go year after year after year doing that. And so I looked at it and I said, I asked him how he had bought his properties. And he said he had mainly done turnkey, as he was an out-of-state investor also buying in Birmingham. And I said, how did you find them and stuff like that? And I went a similar route as him. And I was pretty nervous buying the first property. My work pays for my rent, so I don't even own for my own house. I never saw the purpose, or at least the return on investment, of buying my own property. So it was pretty nervous, honestly. But I went into it and I looked at it like this. I said, if worst comes to worst, the house was $106,000.
Okay.
So I said, if worst case scenario goes really bad, I'll just turn around and sell it.
Right.
I'm not getting caught in like, a $500,000 investment. I thought my risk was fairly mitigated. And I said, I'm going to take a shot at this. And then that house went really well. And I said, let's do it again. And then, so I bought another house like 2 months later. And I was like, okay, let's do it again. And then I just kept kind of buying houses, pretty quickly. So it's some of it. I think a lot of people get caught up in reading, 10 real estate books.
Yeah.
I've spent, a good amount of time on like the Big Pockets forum, and I've read a couple books. But I didn't want to delay in action. I said, let's go for it. So yeah, it's been, it's been rented since day one, all the properties.
Yeah.
And it's gone pretty good so far.
Very cool. So let's just round out the story of that first one. So you paid 106. Rent was what?
Rent at that is right at like $1,000, a little bit over.
And did you get commercial, just standard financing, like 20% down, 30%? What?
I just put down 20% down. So that was single family.
Yep.
So the first 3 are single family. The 4th is multifamily.
Okay.
And I think something that in hindsight, I don't regret the purchases in the slightest, but going forward, it will be a focus on multifamily because the 10 conventional loans is going to come up. Mm-hmm. And I want to maximize the next properties in all multifamily, going strictly for maximum cash flow.
Okay. And then, did you actually go see the property because you were states away, or did you do everything over the phone?
I did not. So, I bounced the idea off of many people, and they're like, you should probably go see the property. And, honestly, I was like, maybe I should go see the property. But the company I worked with were on several podcasts. I looked them up online. They left me a good feeling of confidence. And the contract that we wrote up, it was drafted pretty well, where I thought I was pretty protected in the purchase agreement.
Okay. All right. And have you ever seen them since? Have you ever been there?
No, still never done.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Because that's, that's not, the more and more I do this, it's not totally unusual. It does come down to the company that you're working with. Because again, you're buying, as you've already said, you're buying a turnkey or finished product. Sure. So, in that finished product, comes the tenant in the service and property manager and all that. So, one of the things I was most interested to learn about is, because my story is so different, right? As you know, we've talked before. I have focused on one market for my entire investing career. I've looked elsewhere, but I always, and maybe it's wrong. That's why I was so looking forward to this call. I always told myself it is so hard building a team, right? People on the ground, that I don't want to suffer through that again. And maybe that's my mistake. Maybe it's not something that I need to build. Maybe it is relying on turnkey companies, because I'm guessing they provide the property management or at least the introductions, right?
Totally. So that was something I looked at it like this. I said, well, if I can keep a tenant in the property, my risk is, as long as I'm working with a reliable company, mm-hmm. And there's always a tenant in there, or at least like 95+% of the time, I'm going to do all right. I can't go too far backwards in this. But that was something that I looked at. I almost held that. I would say cash flow would be number one, but number two would be right behind that, finding a good property management company. So the route that I went is the same company that rehabbed the property is the same company that does the property management. So I liked that accountability-wise, I could go to one person. They would, it wasn't going to be a situation where the property manager was like, oh no, that was based off the build. We had these issues, go talk to the rehab people. Everything was under one roof, which to me was like, okay, me being out of state, I don't want to chase down a bunch of contractors. I like the idea of being able to address one company, one person, say, hey, what's the deal here if something did take place? And they don't have any other fingers to point to. It's like, okay, we have to deal with that.
Now, is that the same thing for all three of your markets, or was that just luck of Birmingham?
That's been all three.
Okay. And is it the same company or different companies?
Same company, everyone.
Okay. You want to give them a shout out? You can.
Yeah. So, Spartan, Mid-South. And then the other one's, he's kind of running a Mid-South and Spartan are pretty large, but he's running I guess a smaller program himself.
Okay. Very cool. All right. So, how many units do you have now? 9?
I have 7.
7 units or 7 properties? Just to be
7 doors,
okay.
4
7
properties.
doors. Okay. Very cool. So, again, so that's 3 houses in a duplex, or no? 4
Yes.
properties. Okay, fourplex. Got it. Yeah, 3 houses in a fourplex. Fourplex is in which market?
Iowa.
Iowa. Can you tell us a little bit about that one, because it's kind of the first different one for you?
Sure. So I looked at it like this. I obviously I took the performers that were handed to me, and then I wanted to beef them up a little bit, increase the vacancy rate, increase all those things, so I could get a more accurate picture
Mm-hmm.
in terms of a long haul view of
Mm-hmm.
what the expenses would look like and the actual return.
Mm-hmm.
And the fourplex is coming in almost double what the other properties are doing, and the other properties factoring in vacancy, capex, maintenance, all those different expenses, obviously mortgage and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming in at right at 10%, and the fourplex is a little over 15. So I guess not double, but it's
Mm-hmm.
5 extra points is pretty darn good.
Yeah. So again, it may be double cash flow wise, but yield wise, because you have to put a bigger down payment, it's still bigger, is what you're saying.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So one thing, again, I did a video on this because I have a couple of buddies looking for. It seems like everybody's screaming units, 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 and I'm already seeing, at least in my market, right? I don't know Iowa, I don't know Birmingham or Memphis, but I'm seeing some owners who've had fourplexes for a while now just throw some junk on the market at ridiculous prices, like fully remodeled prices for stuff that needs to be rehabbed. Um, so it sounds like you ran the numbers and you're very conservative. So kudos. Do those deals all day long, right? When the yield's 15 on a fourplex and it's 10 on a house, do the fourplex, right? It's a no-brainer.
Totally.
I'm seeing in some markets where houses, again, using your numbers, are 10% and fourplexes or multis are 6, right? Don't do those deals, people, right? Don't be so fixated on units that you actually hurt yourself. Would you agree with that?
100%. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to cash flow and
Yes.
your return on investment. And I also looked at it like, you take 2008. Where did people get hurt? They got hurt because their units weren't cash flowing enough.
Exactly.
As long as the units cash flow enough, if the market could crash tomorrow, it really doesn't matter all that much.
Yeah.
As long as you're in a buy and hold situation.
Yeah. As long as you've conservatively financed fixed rate debt and your vision is long-term hold, it doesn't matter, people, right? It doesn't matter if your balance sheet, right? Your net worth goes down by 50%. It doesn't. If they cash flow, you'll be fine.
Totally.
That's so funny. So the other thing I like in your story is you sort of live what I've been preaching, which is live where you want, but invest where the numbers make sense, right? For some people, that means they live in expensive parts of the country, right? I live in the Silicon Valley. Some people are in New York, SoCal, Miami, wherever it is. But it's okay to invest where the numbers make sense, right?
I completely agree with that. So I think the reality of it is that I have the way I create income that ultimately gets invested in these properties.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I also looked at it for me. So if I had properties in Florida and I drove to the properties and there was an issue, I'm not going to know how to solve that.
Yeah.
To solve it. I'm not a contractor. I work in sales.
Right.
So no matter what, me being at the property, it's not going to ultimately provide me that much benefit.
Right.
So, and I guess it might be a little bit different if you're a hands-on person. I'm not very handy.
Yeah.
So none of these were going to get fixed. If
you and me both.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that people that are in that line of work are handling that. I'm not going to go in and fix the plumbing.
Yeah, it's like I could point at it and go, "That doesn't look right," but I have no idea how to fix it.
It's ultimately going to get a call to somebody else to say, "Hey, what is this? I don't even know what this means."
Yeah.
It appears to be a leak. I'm not even sure if it's condensation. Can you look at this?
Oh man, you and I are in the same boat. It's so funny. It's like, I don't know what to do. Fix it. Somebody, Mark, fix it. Go over there. So that's awesome. So, the other thing that I really like about your story is you're sort of just walking this one rental at a time story, which is something you've heard me preach about, right? Wrote the book about, and you're always on to the next one, right? You've done all of this in 1 year. how do you decide on the markets, right? So you started in one, went to another, went to another. Are you evaluating all three markets at the same time, or do you go, okay, Birmingham's tapped out, I'm going to go to Memphis. Memphis is tapped out, I'm going to go somewhere else? Or are you constantly evaluating all three markets and you just take the best deal?
I'm looking for the deal.
Okay.
You could present me a property in Cincinnati, and as long as there's a property management group that's in place and very reliable and has a track record, I'm okay with that, because I'm not going to be the one dealing with any of that to begin with. So if I feel like if the team that you are working with, if they are reliable, they're the ones that are filling the tenant, they're the ones that are taking care of everything else. It relies more on them than I think anything else.
And how would you recommend interviewing, or, how do you from states away get comfortable with someone you probably have never met and you just see online? Because we all know that online is interesting.
Totally. So I'll call. I'll first say, hey, can you give me a couple clients that you've worked with in the past?
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't feel comfortable doing that, that to me would be a red flag.
Yeah.
You don't have somebody that I could speak with that you worked in the past that has a favorable outlook on your company. That would be like a no-go. So I've called other people and I've asked questions. I want to see first, I guess, when I call a client. I'm a kind of always thinking like, well, am I calling their brother or their sister or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, calling them, and I've been on the phone with them, and I'll honestly try to get them to tell me some negative things about them, so I can see that they're not overly selling the property management. I'm like, well, you've got to not like something about what they've done. What is like one negative experience you could share with me? Because if you're like, no, I've never had one ever, I don't know. To me, I'm like, could this be the client that is like the loopy client that says positive things about everything?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's something as simple as like, I sent them an email and it took them 24 hours to get back to me.
Yeah.
And that to me is not a huge issue, but at least it shows that they're a real person.
Right.
And I guess more so than anything else, if I look at property management, I'm looking at their vacancy rate. I want to make sure that they have a tenant in that property all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another reason why I concentrated on more in that general region in the center of the country, because I knew that if something went awry, they could evict somebody at a relatively quick notice.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I live in California, where relatively quick notice is 90 days, often 120 days. So just real quick, what is an average eviction that of in Alabama, Memphis, and Iowa? Any idea?
Under 30 days.
All three markets.
Yep.
Wow. Gotta like that. Not quite Texas, but pretty good.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. So this has been a lot of fun for me, sort of understanding where you are. Why don't we rewind the clock? And it's amazing. You've been doing all this in 1 year. So again, congratulations. What were you doing last year, the year before? What sort of spun you up on this and made you jump in with both feet?
Sure. So I think I'm probably a little bit younger than your average person that's getting into real estate. So I'm 25 years old. I've always been interested in investing. So in high school, towards the end of the day, I was investing in stocks, and I ended up hitting a couple pretty good stocks. And honestly, in hindsight, I got lucky.
Right.
But I made some decent money doing that. So I think I realized pretty early on that investing is definitely the way to the way out.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I guess I'll back it up a little bit. I've done sales the last 6 years, and I've done pretty all right at it. And I've had a good amount of money in the bank that's been just kind of sitting there. And I wanted something a little bit more concrete in stocks, because I lost a couple of years ago. I lost like $5,000 in a month, and I was like, I don't want to do that again.
That hurts.
Yeah, that was a little painful. So I like the idea of real estate. It seemed now, it's at the end of the day, you only have so much say in where your investment, even in real estate, is going to go. But I felt I had a little bit more say in how the investment could perform. A stock is, it's derived on the value of the stock, however it's interpreted by shareholders. But at least with real estate, I felt I could have some sort of competitive advantage in that sense. Yeah. So that's really had brought me into that.
Yeah, there's no question that the stock market, when you really peel it back, you can have good years, right? And I had good years to the tune of five figures in gains. And then 1 year it just wipes you out, right? Because there's stock market risk, there's sector risk, and then there's company risk. And unfortunately, a lot of people now are suffering through all of those in this bear market that, maybe is bouncing, maybe not. But, um, you only got to lose so much money to realize that it's a casino and you're not in charge, right? They're going to take your money eventually.
Totally.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. And I think if more people looked at it and they said, real estate, it's a little scarier for sure.
Yeah.
But the return on investment, in my opinion, is a lot better than a lot of stock investments for sure.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you do your homework up front and make the acquisition okay, and you buy with purpose, right? I'm going to put 30% down. I'm going to get fixed rate financing. I'm going to, buy a full unit. So it's already rented day one, and you just control all those things. Then you could go do your day job and just crank away, right? People have to be good at their day jobs, but then let the asset, just as you're doing, just kind of run without you, right? It doesn't take a lot of attention from you today, right? I mean, 7 units, how many hours a month are you responding to emails or phone calls on those?
Virtually none.
Exactly.
I'm not spending any time on that. I'm spending time in where I've made my money.
Yeah.
I just kind of let the investment take care of itself.
Yeah. The other thing that you're doing, which I just want to call out, is you're playing great offense and great defense, right? You're a young man, right? You're in your mid-20s. You sort of shared with, hey, got a bunch of money in the bank, which kudos to you, because when I was 25, I spent that stuff, right? I spent that stuff on stupid things, and you didn't. So kudos to you. And then, so you're focused on your day job, making the money, and then you're playing good defense. So you're saving money, right? You talked about you don't pay rent because your job takes you all over the country. You just keep stacking that paper, and you're going to be somewhere pretty fantastic. So why don't we jump forward, and what does 3 to 5 years look like for Brad? I mean, have you ever thought about where you could be in 3 to 5 years?
Totally. So I guess at the expense of sounding like pompous, I totally believe that within the next 5 years, if I wanted to, I could retire. I like working, so I don't think that would be something I would ever pursue. But I like the idea of, like, if one day I said I don't want to work, that I'd have enough income coming in from the year that I could say it. I don't really have to work.
Right.
And I guess if you look at even retirement, I don't think I'll end up keeping the equity in these houses. I think I'll end up refinancing at some point to pull the equity out and reduce my liability.
Yeah.
But I think if looking to the future in retirement, I think it's totally an option. And I think a concern with a lot of people, I have a lot of peers that have come up to me. They've said, what are you doing, or how are you doing this, and stuff like that. Other of my friends and a lot of, I guess, just people my age, they went early on for the resume builder.
Yeah.
They wanted to work in the corporate ladder and climb the corporate ladder, and that's all right.
Yeah.
But I think you're foregoing money. And I looked at it like this: if you want to get a job with Goldman Sachs, why do you want to get a job with Goldman Sachs? Well, the name sounds great. Why does the name sound great? It sounds great because they are supposed to pay you a good amount of money, which I'm sure there's a lot of people in Goldman Sachs that are making a killing. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was like, I knew I was good at sales, and I knew I could make sales. I do door-to-door sales, which for a lot of people is like extremely, they look at that and they're like, are you serious?
Yeah. They still do that?
Yeah. It's nuts to people, but
yeah.
I can put my ego aside if somebody's like, oh dude, I work in New York City on Wall Street. All right. That's fine. Yeah. You do your thing.
Yeah.
But, I found door-to-door sales to be like outrageously lucrative.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's the key, right? If you're a young person, let's just say 25 or younger, even in high school, you have choices, right? You can do what I call the middle-class mindset. And that is, okay, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a good job. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to get a family and blah, 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 blah. And I've lived that life. And I could tell you that for most people, you're stuck in the rat race forever. Or you can go, you know what? I'm going to try to do something I can stack as much paper as I can. I'm going to not spend it, right? I'm going to live modestly, and I'm going to buy assets that are inflation protected, that will, that are paid off by others. And you know what? By 30, I'm done. I know which route sounds better to me now.
Sure. But it's funny because I've reached out to some of my friends who I was like, I called them up and said, hey, I just made this amount in this, when I was when I was like 2021, I was making during like my peak season, I was making like $5,000 plus a week. And I called up some of my friends and I'm like, dude, I know you like your job right now, but you know, you're pretty talented. You could talk to people. Why not come out and work with me? And they'd say, I don't want to do door. It's the stigma of door-to-door sales.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to let that bother me. But finally, I've reached out to a couple more of my friends after they've seen me buy the houses.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we're gonna join you, and we're gonna do the same thing you're doing.
Good for you. Helping people is awesome. It's why I do what I do now, frankly. So, I am curious. Do you know what number you need to be done? Right? Do you have a I'm done number, or whatever that is? Is it $5,000 a month? What is it?
So I originally looked at it and I said I want to have my expenses covered on it a year. So I really don't spend that much money. My largest expense is food. I go out to like nice restaurants, but other than that, I don't have very many expenses. I'm not buying fancy clothes.
Yeah.
I'm not buying expensive watches, expensive cars. That's never been an interest.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming anybody that drives a nice vehicle.
Yeah.
It's just never been something that's interested me. Because I think I've always looked at the return on investment on those things just being pretty negligible.
Yeah. Well, it's negative. It's not negligible. It's bad.
Yeah. So originally it was $30,000. I said, I want to make these houses, just get me to the point where my expenses are covered. And then I looked at it, I'm like, well, $30,000 is going to come up pretty quick. Yeah. So I was like, okay, now 50. And then I thought about that a little more. So I think my goals of right now is, as soon as possible, I'd like to get to $75,000 a year, where I have just passive income. So that's going to take a little bit. That's for sure.
All right. So that's like $6,250 a month.
Yeah. That would be great. It would be I could live on $25,000 a year. I'm really not spending much money.
Well, let's just hold on. So, I don't know, maybe. One thing that would be different is your rent would be different, right? Because right now you're not paying rent, but in theory, if you were retired, that would be on you, I would guess.
Totally.
Okay. All right. So that's that number? That's in the 25?
I guess I haven't looked at it from that perspective because my rent is covered. It's been covered for like the last 5-6 years.
Right.
But no, I guess that would be something of consideration. I don't live at 25,000. I could if I had to.
Right.
But 75,000 it'd be plenty to live on. But
I think so. Yeah.
I don't ever plan on retiring. So I look at 75,000 plus whatever my regular income is as being a pretty good amount of money.
Yeah. So I'll just call it this way. $75,000 is your get out of the rat race, right? Where you have to do something.
Sure.
And then when you're out, I can tell you right now, having lived that life, it's freaking awesome because the opportunities actually explode for you on what you could do. I am curious. I don't normally ask this, but I'll ask it anyway. All right. So it's 5 years. You're now 30, right? You just had your 30th birthday. You no longer have to work. Where do you want to live, right? Because you've been all over the country. Do you have a spot that says, I want to plant roots here, or maybe you and your significant other? I mean, have you even thought about that?
I totally have. So I've been to a lot of states. I've lived in Colorado, Connecticut, New York, Georgia for a little bit, Arizona, New Mexico, El Paso, Houston, Dallas. I've lived like pretty much all over the place. Florida's the best. I've been to California, and no shot against you. I like California.
It's okay.
Florida's great.
Yeah. Okay. So Miami, Fort Lauderdale, anywhere?
So I'm in Orlando right now. Orlando, and this is kind of funny, but Orlando's a little too cold, maybe.
Oh, come on.
It was 60 yesterday, and I had to wear a jacket.
Oh my
God.
I don't
know. I haven't lived on the East Coast of Florida. I lived in the Naples, Fort Myers area. Okay. I've lived in Tampa and now Orlando.
All right.
But I don't know. The East Coast is kind of sounding, fairly appealing. Miami, not sure about that. Fort Lauderdale, very possibly.
Yeah. So, these kind of markets, so you're going to be probably, even if you live modestly, because you're eventually going to have a significant other, you're eventually going to have kids. I mean, it happens, right? So 75 grand, I still think covers everything. So I think that's a great freedom number, out of rat race, whatever you want to call that. So I bet you can get there certainly by the time you're 30, man. So that's awesome.
It's definitely on track right now. And maybe once I get to that point, there'll be another reevaluation. Maybe it's 100 grand or 120, but
let's be clear. You're never going to stop. I already see it in you. Right? You're never going to stop. But again, 75 grand's a number, right? And the other thing I would tell you to do is something I made the mistake of, and you may be just type A enough that you'd make this mistake also, is start celebrating the small wins. right? What maybe when you get to right when you close the fourplex, or you get to 10 units, or you get to 25, or you get to the 10 loans, whatever it is, make sure you mark those with something. It doesn't have to be expensive. Maybe it's a nice dinner or a bottle of wine or whatever it is for you. But when you look back, when you get to be my age, right after 15 years, if you don't have those touchstones, I missed that. I made that mistake.
I think you bring up a very valid point. So I've looked at it more and more, even really over the last 6 months. And I've always looked at money as, this, not like a god by any means, but something I've always wanted to get more and more and more of.
Mm-hmm.
It's been something I've not been amazing at sports my entire life. I've been pretty good at about acquiring money. Nothing amazing, but I've done all right. And now it's kind of at that point where I can see, like, if I just keep doing the real estate, it's going to pan out. There's almost no question in my mind of whether that's going to work. And now it's kind of the question of, well, what do I want to do that's more meaningful than even just work? And that's something that has been just like a constant thought in my mind over the last 6 months.
Yeah.
What is something more meaningful, and maybe some sort of give back situation of helping others. And it's totally interesting now that the investing thing is set in stone and it's moving forward. I see the light at the end of the tunnel, which to me a while ago looked like this. And now it's like, I can see it. I can see it finally.
Cool.
But it's, what is the more meaningful route and all this? Like, what is the bigger picture?
Yeah.
Money's great, but what is for, I guess, lack of or maybe a cop-out term, what is the calling?
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. I look forward to watching your journey and staying connected, because it's going to be fun to see. I can't think of anybody I've known that's been financially free by 30. I've known some people in their 30s, but nobody in their 20s. So this is going to be fun to watch from my perspective. Something I always do at the end of the show or end of the interview is turn it over to you, where you can share whatever you like, books, how to get a hold of you, tell people what you're looking for, whatever you want. The floor is yours. Share away, Brad.
Sure. I guess I don't know where to take that, but
fair enough.
I guess my advice, I don't think I'm a guru or anything like that by any stretch of the imagination. But I think, I was on the phone call with somebody else within the last week, and they said, hey, I want to do the real estate like you. And I was like, well, what are you doing right now? And they shared where they're working. I was like, can I be upfront with you? Like, what are you taking in?
Yeah.
And he's like, he shared the number, and I'm like, dude, I don't mean this in any bit offensive in the slightest bit, but the real estate's a big pipe dream. I would focus on increasing your income before you even think about doing real estate, because that is such a unrealistic goal for you right now. If you can't get your earnings up, if you don't have side money to ultimately put in for an investment, it doesn't matter if you want to own 100 million properties, because it's so unrealistic if you don't have any money to put in.
Yeah.
So I think my advice, and maybe, some of my friends say, maybe you look too much at money, but I look at it like this. If you don't have enough money, money does become your God.
Yeah.
It is that situation where that's all you think about. And for me, I guess income is just, it's been like the ultimate, the freedom of seeing and doing whatever you want. In the last year, I've been to, aside from, I want to invest in real estate, as everybody says, another thing that people say is they say, I want to travel.
Yeah.
And I've looked at other people and they're like, I can't wait till retirement and I can go do this, that, and that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to wait until retirement. And there's been a quote that's been floating around in my head for the last years. And I guess it's not even so much a quote, but rather like a mantra. So people in their early stages of life, in their teens, their 20s, maybe even 30s, they've got youth. They have certainly plenty of longevity, but they don't have any time. They don't have enough time because they're working so much. And you look at people in the middle of their life. They've got relative youth. They have money, but they also don't have time. And you look at people who are older, in their 70s and 80s, and they have time. They've got money, but they don't have any youth. And it's like, for me, I never looked at it, and I never wanted to travel at the end of my life. It's like waiting until then to experience things. So in the last 12 months, I've been to Germany, Greece, Singapore, Australia, Hawaii, Mexico, Paris. I feel like I'm missing a place. But so So I work for, like, this past year, I worked right at maybe 9 months out of the year. And that's been something, like, for me, the work that I've done with door-to-door sales, I work really, really hard for like a portion of the year,
Yeah.
but then I have another portion to go out and travel and see the world and do whatever I want. So I think I don't know if anybody's even looking for advice, but my 2 cents would be, go for the income. Don't pass it up for, a resume builder. I think people in their 20s, they should be at that point where it shouldn't be a resume builder anymore. It should be like, I need to make money and I need to have financial freedom and stuff like that. So going for the income and going for something that might ultimately be more challenging. So for me, it was, door-to-door sales it's very challenging for a lot of people.
Hmm.
But then it gets to the point that the income, it can be there if you work hard. It certainly pans out over time. Most of my peers, like, in their 20s, like in my office, we have people in their 25, 26, 27, making 300, 400, $500,000 a year doing door-to-door sales.
Hmm.
And I tell all my friends about it, because to me, it's almost like mind-blowing that if you can talk to a person and you have decent work ethic, the script is there. So why not just put in the time to learn it and be good at it? But I don't know, maybe I just got in with the right company.
No, well, certainly company luck has something to do with it, but you're being too modest, Brad. You have the work ethic, the drive, the focus. You would have been successful probably whatever company you went to, as long as the product worked. So, understand that and appreciate that. Again, I agree 100%. The job of most people should be to stack paper, right? Income, as you called it, and not a resume builder. Because what are we supposed to do, right? We are supposed to, at some point in our life, have income. Now, is it active or passive, that exceeds our expenses? The best way to do that is with passive income, i.e. rental properties, so that you've basically created or bought time, or you bought options, whatever you want to call that. And the earlier you do that, the more fun life is, right? You can go to 12 places. I couldn't even keep up if you want to travel when you're 25 to 12 different countries, go for it. So I applaud you. This is going to be so much fun to watch you. I look forward to having you back on in a year or so to see where you are. And I really thank you for giving us some time today.
I appreciate you having me on. It was
All
awesome.
right. Thanks, man.